title, we will be talking about the religious instructions of the Negro. Sorry for the delay. We are having some technical difficulties, but you know, we still gonna push through, make it do what it do. And welcome to the podcast. Tonight, just grab you some water. We are doing reading tonight. You watching on TikTok, make sure you are tapping into those hearts. My name is Dr. Chief Sunflower. Before we get into the video, listen guys, this is a positive space so that we can grow, get wisdom, talk about history, and the subjects that most people will, find, difficult to talk about. So tonight we're going to be reading the first chapter of this book that I've been reading today, and listen. Sending love to my Niji out there, OCO, to the Niji, to the Marianians, to the indigenous, melanated, copper tone, autochthonous beings all over the world, but sending special love to all the melanated beings on Turtle Island, because, we just have to continue spreading the knowledge, spreading the wisdom. And my thing is, today I went to search for this book, I didn't go to search for this book. I was interested in knowing why, cannibalism is not illegal in all states. Because I saw someone talking about it, so I went to do some research. It's only illegal in, I think, Idaho, which is bizarre. So that led me to this book right here. So that's what we're going to be discussing today. So make sure you go ahead and smash that subscribe button. Tap those hearts wherever you're watching from. Our goal is to get 1,000 hearts on TikTok. What's up, T-Time Beauty? And if you're watching on other platforms, make sure you go ahead and tap those hearts. Alright? So this topic, like I said, is going to be very touchy, but we got to touch on it. And I am going to be focusing on this book for the next couple of lives. Hood to Hooded Nightcap. Yeah, this is going to be a long one, T-Time Beauty. It might be a past your bedtime. But I forgot you are on Cali time, so it's not 1:11 a.m. where you are. So we're going to, get into it. I have a lot to cover tonight, so I'm not going to waste any time. I just got to get all of my, housekeeping out of the way. So the topic is introduction to religious instruction of Negroes, guys. If you want to follow along the book and you're watching on TikTok, you can come to my YouTube and you can actually see the book page by page as I'm reading. Unfortunately, if I try to do that for TikTok, I am here for now. If I try to do that for TikTok, then it's too much like back and forth. So if you want to see the words, then come to YouTube, or you can watch the replay on YouTube, but you will be able to hear me reading. So I'm going to turn my music down and let's just get into the live. Alright? So imagine being born into a system where someone controls not only your body but your mind, and I will help you get to your goal. Thank you so much, T-Time Beauty. You are the absolute best. Thank you for being my #1 heart pumper. Hold on, let me get my sound fixed. Yay! Alright. So imagine being born into a system where someone controls not only your body, but your mind, your language, your spirituality, your identity, and even your understanding of God. Right? Imagine books being written specifically to shape the behavior of enslaved people. And, a lot of people feel like, of course, we were indigenous to this land, but because of the rules and the systems that were put in place, I feel like now there is wage slavery, theft, time theft. It all stems from these ideologies that we're going to learn about in this book. And it was hella shocking to me. I was just reading this book like, what? Are you serious? Anywho, not to mention, um, these books were written to shape our behavior, not to free us. It was, to condition us to be obedient. So tonight we're beginning a powerful series, not from hate, not from revenge, but for awareness. Okay? This is to bring awareness. Because once you understand how systems were built, which is why I love going back into history, y'all, you stop blaming yourself for surviving inside the system. Because it's meant for you to just be a laborer. And they're going to talk about this, how they want you to just labor, go to church. They didn't even want you to go, to get religion. You'll understand when I start reading. But this is Hood to Hood, and today we're beginning the reading of Religious Instructions of Negroes. Yes, this is a book. You see it. Okay? This guy wrote this book. Let me pull this up for y'all on all the other platforms. So why this series matters to me. I want to make something very clear before we begin. This series is not about attacking spirituality. This series is about analyzing history. Because so many people get lost in the sauce. There's so much information going around when all you have to do is go to the source and read the source. See, I fell back off of religion because I read so many different sources, and this is one that I'm just digging into that just solidifies everything that I've been learning so far in the past and in the present. Throughout history, religion has done two things simultaneously. It has healed people, and it has been used and weaponized by institutions, right? And if we're mature enough intellectually, we should be able to study both, especially how it has been weaponized to control people who look like me. And you might not even think so. One thing I've learned is when people fear books being discussed, such as colonizers, there's usually something inside of these books worth understanding. So this is valuable wisdom that we are collecting tonight in chapter 1. Many people never even knew texts like this exist. They think that they just got religion because this is just how it was born and raised into for generations. Oh, no. There was always a plan by Master. Books specifically designed around how enslaved people, just enslaved in the system just because of your color, you feel me? The American Indians were enslaved just because of their color. Even if they were free, they were still considered chattel, something to be trafficked for labor, for time, etc., etc. Okay? These books were specifically wait a minute. These books were specifically designed around how enslaved people should think, behave, worship, and obey. So you think you around here obeying right now just because you obeying? No, you're obeying because this is what Massa wants, even to this day. What else are we going to uncover during this journey in chapter 1? We're going to uncover the psychological side. This is deeper than enslavement. This is deeper. This is about the psychology of it. Because if you can control someone's identity, and if you are around here allowing the enemy to tell you who you are, to give you a religion, you can control their identity, their history, their spiritual lens, education, and emotional conditioning. If you can control these things, you create generational obedience. So we talk about generational curses, but one thing that makes people generationally cursed is because you have generational obedience to the colonizer, the people who are controlling everything right now, because you just fall down. And one way they realize to get everyone to be weaker and to fall down is by enforcing religious instructions. Because if you can follow religious instructions, you can follow the legal instructions. Because really, religion and politics back in the day was all one. They made religion legal, and then, if you didn't honor their religion, you were considered a demon. You were considered a heathen, so that they could unalive you, and they were not considered heathen. You'll see what I mean when I start reading the text for today, right? So I need people to understand something. Physical chains eventually come off. The physical chains eventually came off of those families that were trafficked and kidnapped and unalive, because they call it, white supremacy and enslavement, but really it was um, MURDER, genocide. You gotta follow what I'm saying because I'm trying to just like trick the AI because it's summarizing every damn thing I say. But y'all get what I'm saying? So really, it wasn't that. It was really just straight evil, just torture, eating people, all of these different things, cannibalism. That's what led me to this religious book. I wasn't even looking for this book today. I honestly wasn't, but it fell on my spirit and it fell in my lap. So I know that we gotta take it there. Mental chains can survive for centuries, family. They can survive for centuries. Okay? That's why studying these historical texts matter, because they are not going to teach you this in school. A lot of people will not even go to find this, or they don't even know how to find this text. So if you want to find this text, you can go to the Internet Archive. They got all the texts you ever could want to study about history. I promise you. Release me from these spiritual chains. Yes, this first chapter might just release a lot of people. Even though I felt released before reading this, after I read it, it just gave me confirmation. Tea time. It gave me so much confirmation. I was like, wow. And now I'm learning how to understand history without getting mad and angry. Because before, I used to be pissed the hell off. But now I'm understanding that I have to teach this so other people can also have the same wisdom that I'm collecting. I can't teach from a upset, angry space. Yes, education helps me process sometimes. I could put a name to it. Facts. Same here. So this is why we're studying this text right now on this podcast. Not because we want to stay trapped in trauma, because it is traumatizing reading it sometimes, but because we want to understand how systems shape culture, fear, self-worth, and even the way people see themselves today. So let's get into the first passage. Let's transition into the text, and we're going to do this in series. So it's simple. We're going to read, think critically, and we're going to ask some questions. I'm going to try to get through the whole chapter 1, and then we're going to stop. Okay? Chapter 1 is like 46 pages, but I'm a pretty fast reader, so we're going to get through it. It might take me a little minute, but I'll try not to like stop and, summarize all the time, but it has a lot of things that I have to stop on. So just notice the tone that they're using, the framing, the assumptions, who benefits from the ideology being taught. And history becomes danger when people stop analyzing motive. Every institution has motive. Every empire has motive. Every curriculum has motive. All right? So, let's go. Let's dive into the religious instructions of the Negro. Y'all ready? All right. So, The Religious Instructions of the Negro in the United States by Charles C. Jones. I'm not going to read the preface. We're going to skip that part. It has this contents page with all of the chapters and the breakdown. I'm not going to read that part. Blessings. What's going on? OCO. Hope you're having a peaceful evening. We are having a peaceful, enlightened evening. We just getting some knowledge going, breaking this history down. So we're going to go through part 1, which is chapter 1, and then we'll go to part 2, part 3. They have a 4. All right, part 1. Let's dive in. Let's make sure I can see. Okay. I might be kind of close here. It says, part 1. Historical sketch of the religious instructions of Negro from the first introduction into the country, 1620 to the year 1842. Now, we as indigenous people have to overstand and understand that we were already here. So when they're writing these texts in the 1800s, they are still trying to trick you out your spot and, you know, trying to control the narrative. But you can read between the lines and you'll know that we were not all bought over here on a boat. And if you were, you know, moved around intercontinental, then they might have moved you from one area on the land to another and said that you came from Africa. You feel me? Anywho, Chapter 1. Such is the scarcity of materials and the difficulty of arriving at the scattered sources of information that I have called the following historical notice of religious instructions of the Negro in the United States a sketch. It deserves no better name, although perhaps it may embody the principal facts on the subject. For the sake of perspicuity, the sketch is divided into periods of time. The first period extending from the introduction of the Negroes into the country, you see how they lie, in 1620 to the first census 1700, a period of 170 years. The second period from 1790 to 1820, a period of 30 years, and the third period from 1820 to 1842, a period of 22 years. It says 1. Account of the introduction of Negroes into the colonies under the government of Great Britain. It was in the year 1501 that Isabella of Spain granted permission for the introduction of Negro slaves into Hispaniola, but such only as has been born in Spain or in slavery among Christians. And in the following years, a few had been sent into the New World. In 1508, the Spaniards opened a direct trade into slaves and imported Negroes into Hispaniola from the Portuguese settlements on the coast of Guinea. Ferdinand V. by royal ordinance enjoyed a direct traffic. See, they were trafficking. They tell you in the book. And slaves between Guinea and Hispaniola. In 1511, and Charles V, 1512 to 1513. In 1517, Charles V granted a patent to one of his Flemish favorites containing an exclusive right of importing slaves, 4,000 annually, into Hispaniola, Cuba, Jamaica, Puerto Rico. This favorite sold his patent to some Guineas merchants for 2,500 ducats, and they were the first who brought into regular form that commerce for slaves between Africa and America, which has since been carried on under such revolting circumstances and such an amazing extent. I know this stuff is boring right now, but we're going to get to the juicy part, I promise. All right. It says 45 years after 1562 to 1563, the English centered the trade under Sir John Hawkins and carried Negroes from Africa to Hispaniola. We don't have any evidence of these boats and all of this stuff, but you know, this is what it's saying in the book. And in 1567, Queen Elizabeth protected and shared the traffic. You see, they're talking about trafficking people right in this book. The Queen, Elizabeth, all of these people, right? Thus, the mother country was engaged in traffic 45 years before the first permanent settlement was made in her American colonies, which was at Jamestown, Virginia in 1607. It says the Dutch, in common with other maritime nations of Europe, engaged in the trade and a man of war of the nation from coast of Guinea in August 1620, 4 months before the Plymouth colony arrived in America. Landed 20 Negroes for sale in the colony of Virginia on James River, which determines the epoch of their introduction into the colonies. From this period, they were gradually and at different times introduced into all the colonies from Massachusetts to Georgia, and for the most part contrary to the wishes of the colonists. We are here. What's up? The first cargo of Negro slaves was brought into Boston in 1645, and though their introduction was denounced and the Negroes ordered to be returned at public charge, yet it was afterwards permitted in public and people engaged in the trade. So they were trafficking, people that they brought on the ships, I'm guessing, but they're not talking about the Indians who are already here. The Coppertone race was already here, so please don't get it confused. We were already here. Okay, this book is written in the 1800s, after they're trying to clean up their story, but you can still get a lot of truth out of this book. It says, in Maryland, acts were passed encouraging the importation of Negroes in 1671. And in this same year, they were first introduced into South Carolina. They were legally admitted into Georgia in 1747. It's kind of crazy because I got census records, that go so far back that shows us that we are indigenous. It says we. No. I'm not African American. You might be African American. So don't assume who I am. My people are indigenous to Turtle Island. We are inhabitants, autochthonous. Okay? So don't try to put your beginnings on other people. I am Choctaw. Yes, I am Choctaw, Muskogean, Creek, all of that. Right? Anywho, let's not get distracted, guys. In Maryland, acts were passed encouraging the importation of Negroes in 1671, and in this same year, they were first introduced into South Carolina. They were legally admitted into Georgia. The precise year of their admission into the remaining 8 of the old 13 colonies is not accurately known. Then it says number 2. Estimated Negro population of the colonies at the Declaration of Independence and census of 1790. I have no reference at hand by which to determine the number of Negroes in each of the colonies, nor the aggregate in all before the Declaration of Independence, as no general census was ever taken of the colonies while they continued such. But there are statements of these numbers in most of the colonies given in different years, which I shall proceed to mention. So they're talking about, people in the colonies. All right. So I have to mute you, Samuel. You're talking too much, okay? I mean, you can't talk now, so goodbye. I have no reference. I read that part. Virginia was settled in 1607 and in 1671 contained 2,000 Negroes. In 1763, 100,000. Massachusetts was settled in 1620 and in 1763 contained 4,500. All right. It says Rhode Island was settled in 1636 and 1680 had imported but a few Negroes. And 1730 contained 16,048. So they're just talking about people they have trafficked and how many people they have trafficked, basically. Thank you for your service, Your Highness. Thank you guys for the positivity. Okay, we just trying to learn. I'm not trying to tell Dr. Sean who she is. So if you say something flip, I will probably mute you, and then if you do say something crazy, I will block you. Okay. So next is going into like a lot of different numbers about how many Negroes were settled in this part. I'm probably going to skip this, guys, because it's pretty boring. That's not the part that I want to really talk about. We're going to keep it moving. Okay? It says number 3. Okay? Efforts for their religious instructions, both in Great Britain and America, year by year during this period. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Having brought distinctly to view this multitude of people introduced amongst us in the inscrutable providence of God, the original stock being in a state of absolute heathenism. They said the original stock was heathenism while they were out here colonizing the land. Make it make sense. We may inquire into the efforts made for their religious instructions. Oh yeah. 1673. Mr. Baxter published his Christian Directory, in which he has a chapter of directions to those masters on foreign plantations who have Negroes and other slaves, being a solution of several cases about them. The first direction calls upon masters to understand well how far your power over your slaves extends and what limits God has set thereto. What? Remember that they have immortal souls and are equally capable of salvation with yourself, and therefore you have no power to do anything which shall hinder their salvation. Remember that God is their absolute owner, and that you have none but a derived and limited propriety in them, and that they and you are equally under the government and laws of God. That God is their reconciled tender father, and if they be as good, do love them as well as you, and that they are the redeemed ones of Christ. Therefore, so use them as to preserve Christ's right interest in them. Crazy. It says, direction 2D. Remember that you are Christ's trustees or the guardians of their souls. People are not property. Facts. They writing it like we are their property under God. This is in this book. Yeah. So what's going on, what I'm reading right now, so it's talking about this other paper, which I didn't read, but I did find, from 1673 by this guy called Mr. Baxter, who was sending a message from New England to the States to say, hey, this is how you're supposed to control the people. We're over them, blah, 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 blah. His thing is called Christian Directory, okay? The directions for the masters and foreign plantations for their Negroes. Let's carry on. It says, so must you exercise both your power and love to bring them to the knowledge and the faith of Christ and to just obedience of God's commands. The 3D. So serve your necessities by your slaves as to prefer God's interest and their spiritual everlasting happiness. Teach them the way to heaven and do all for their souls which I have before directed you to do for all other servants. Though you may make some differences in their labor and diet and clothing, yet none as to the furthering of their salvation. If they be infidels, use them so as tendeth to win them to Christ and the love of religion, by showing them that Christians are less worldly, less cruel and passionate. How you a master on a plantation with stolen land talking about you less cruel and you passionate? Psychopaths. So when I say psychopaths, that's what I be talking about. Doesn't make no sense. Focus, Dr. Sean, because they pissing me off. This is going to piss you off even more the more I read, because we got a lot more to talk about in this chapter. Let's keep going. And more wise and charitable and holy and meek than other persons are. We to them that by their cruelty and covetousness do scandalize even slaves and hinder their conversion and salvation. The seventh and last direction. Make it your chief end in buying and using slaves to win them to Christ and save their soul. How the fuck you do that? How do you buy a slave and use them to win and save their soul? You're not making any sense, my guy. You're really not making no sense. It says, do not only endeavor it on by when you have first controlled your own commodity, but make this more of your end than your commodity itself. And let their salvation be far more valued by you than their service. And carry yourself to them as those that are sensible that they are redeemed with them by Christ from the slavery of Satan, and may live with them in liberty of the saints in glory. The works of this eminent servant of God had an extensive circulation, and these directions may have been productive much good on the plantation of those owners into hands they fell. 44 years after the settlement of Connecticut, the Assembly forwarded answers to the inquiries of the Lords of the Committee of Colonies, wherein they say, there are but few servants and fewer slaves not above 30 in the colony. There come sometimes 3 or 4 blacks from the Barbados, which are sold for 22 cents each or something. I can't really read it out. Great care is taken of the instructions of the people in the Christian religion by ministers catechizing and preaching twice every Sabbath and sometimes on lecture day, and also by masters of families instructing their children and servants which law commands them to do. 1701. The Society for the Propagation of Gospel in Foreign Parts was incorporated under William III on the 16th day of June 1701, and the first meeting of the society under its charter was the 27th of June of the same year. Thomas Lord, Bishop of Canterbury, primate and metropolitan of all England, was appointed by the Majesty the first president. The society was formed with the view primarily of supplying the destitution of religious institutions and privileges among the inhabitants of the North American colonies, members of the established Church of England, and secondarily extending the gospel to the Indians and Negroes. That's what it says. It had been preceded by a company incorporated by Charles II in 1661 for the propagation of gospel among heathen nations of New England and the parts adjacent in America, which however did not accomplish much. The design for the times then present and the necessities of the colonies being too narrow. The Honorable Robert Boyle was first president of this company, and it was his connection with this society which led him into deeper interest into defense and propagation of Christian religion and propagation of Christian religion, and he therefore left in his will an annual salary forever for the support of 8 sermons in the year for proving Christian religion against notorious infidels. And he requires that the preachers employed shall be assisting to all companies and encouraging them in any way undertaking for propagating the Christian religion in foreign parts. The Society for Propagation of the Gospel in Foreign Parts enter upon its duties with zeal, being patronized by the king and all the dignitaries of the Church of England. They instituted inquiries into the religious condition of the colonies, responded to by the governor and persons of the best note. And they perceived that the work consisted of 3 great branches: the care and instruction of our people settled in the colonies. Now they had 3 great branches that they talking about that they wanted to institute. So listen up closely. So they wanted to, the care and instruction of their people settled in the colonies. It said the conversion of the Indian savages. I read along the same lines in the Black as Fuck literature. And the conversion of the Negro. Before appointing missionaries, they sent out traveling preacher Reverend George Keith, an itinerant missionary, who assisted with himself Reverend John Talbot. Mr. Keith preached between North Carolina and Piscataqua River in New England, a tract above 800 miles in length, and completed his mission in 2 years. In return, reported his labor to the society. So they have a society for propagating the gospel to convert Indians, which is our people. They say Negroes, people who they have captured and trafficked, and their own colonies to Christianity. Okay? The annual meeting of this society was regularly held from 1702 to 1819, and 118 sermons preached before it by Bishop of the Church of England, a large number of them distinguished for piety, learning, zeal. The society still exists. The effort of the Society for the Religious Instruction of the Negro are briefly as follows. In June 1702, the Reverend Samuel Thomas, the first missionary, was sent to the colony of South Carolina. The society designed he should attempt conversion of the Yamasee Indians. See, the Yamasee, they come from where I'm from, around Tallahassee, Florida, the southeast. They said that they was trying to convert the Yamasee Indians to Christianity. I live in North Carolina, South Carolina, She-Rock, Catawba, Sawtleys. Wow. So they was in your neck of the woods trying to convert your ancestors. The society designed he should attempt the conversion of the Yamasee Indians, but the governor, Sir Nathaniel Johnson, appointing him to the care of the people, settled on the 3 branches of Cooper River, making Goose Creek his residence. He reported his labors to the society and said that he had taken much pains also in instructing the Negroes and learned 20 of them to read. He died in 1706, supponing. Dr. LeJeune succeeded him in 1706 and found parents and masters endued with much goodwill and ready disposition to have their children and servants taught Christian religion. He instructed and baptized many Negroes and Indian slaves. His communicants in 1714 arose to 70 English and 8 Negroes. Dr. LeJeune died 1717 and was succeeded permanently by Reverend Mr. Ludlam, who began his mission with great diligence. There were in his parish a large number of Negroes native to the place, who understood English well. He took good pains to instruct several of them in the principle of the Christian religion, and afterwards admitted them to baptism. It's crazy. He said if the masters of them would heartily concur to forward so good a work, all those who have been born in the country might without much difficulty be instructed and received into the church. Mr. Ludlam continued his labors among the Negroes and every year taught and baptized several of them. In 1 year 11, besides some mulattoes. The Indians were the Indian War, the Seminole Wars and stuff. The Indian War checked the progress of the society's mission for several years. The parishes of St. Paul's, St. John, St. Andrews, St. Bartholomew, St. Helens received missionaries. Mr. Hassel was settled in the last named parish, and the inhabitants were 565 whites, 950 Negroes, 60 Indian slaves, and 23 Negroes. What? Anywho, Reverend Gilbert Jones was appointed missionary of the Church of the Christ Church Parish 1711. He used great pains to persuade the masters and mistresses to assist in having their slaves instructed the Christian faith. Oh, you think that they was giving you something good, huh? You think that your grandma and them just became a Christian, huh? You didn't know how they ended up in this religion. Well, we're going to get to that in this chapter. It's going to continue to shock you, so just bear with me. I promise you, it gets even worse, which is sad. It said, he used great pains to persuade the masters and mistresses to assist in having their slaves instructed in the Christian faith, but found this good work lay under difficulties as yet insuperable. He wrote thus concerning this matter: though laboring in vain be very discouraging, yet by the help of God I will not cease my labors. And if I shall gain but one proselyte, shall not think much of all my pains. He was succeeded in 1722 by Reverend Mr. Pownall. 2 years after he reported his parish, 470 freeborn and above 700 slaves, some of which understood English tongue, but very few know anything of God or religion. Carry on the conditioning. You say very few knew anything of God or religion. In the parish of St. George, taken out of St. Andrews, the church stands 28 miles from Charleston, South Carolina. Mr. Peter Tushin was sent missionary but removed to Maryland. The Reverend Mr. Bernard succeeded him in 1723, a year after his arrival at Christmas. He had near 50 communicants and was remarkable, 17 Negroes. He baptized several grown persons besides children and Negroes belonging to Alexander Skene, Esquire. The Reverend Mr. Taylor, missionary at St. Andrew's Parish in South Carolina, reported to the society the great interest taken in the religious instruction of their Negroes by Mr. Hage and Mr. Edwards, and their remarkable success. 14 of whom on examination he baptized. The clergy of South Carolina in a joint letter acquainted the society with the fact that Mr. Skene, his lady, and Mr. Hague, his sister, did use great care to have their Negroes instructed and baptized. Yes, it's conditioning. And the Reverend Mr. Bernard, missionary, had baptized 5 Negro children belonging to Mr. Skene and Mr. Hague. And he writes to the society that once he had 19 Negro communions. Mr. Newman was sent to a missionary to North Carolina, 1722. He reported sometime after that he had baptized 269 children, 1 woman and 3 men, and 2 Negroes who could say the creed, the Lord's Prayer, the 10 Commandments, and had good sureties for their further information. Let's pause right there. So he was saying that they baptized these kids, and now that they know the Lord's Prayer and the 10 Commandments, they could take further instructions. What this is saying is once you learn their religion and once they get you into the religion, now you will obey all of their other commands. When it comes to going to work, laboring, you will be obedient. It's called catechism. You see what I'm saying? Let's continue on. The Reverend Mr. Bleak, missionary in Pennsylvania in 1723, reported he had baptized 2 Negro slaves. So their whole goal was to baptize you, to Christianize you. Some people were like, no, you gotta just read. They're gonna tell you what they're doing. If you fall for it, then you just a slave now, basically. In 1709, Mr. Huddlestone was appointed schoolmaster in New York City. He taught 40 poor children out of the society's fund and publicly catechized in the steeple of Trinity Church every Sunday in the afternoon. Not only his scholars, but also the children, servants, and slaves of the inhabitants, and above 100 persons usually attended him. Crazy. The society established also a catechizing school in New York City in 1701, in which city there were computed to about 1,500 Negro and Indian slaves. So you'll notice they always put Negro and Indian slaves together because they're trying to separate the two, but it's really just indigenous people that they're trafficking. Okay. The society hoped, for example, would be generally followed in the colonies. Mr. Elias New, a French Protestant, was appointed catechist. When I'm saying catechist and catechism is spelled like cat, so CATECHIST. Okay, catechist or catechism. Catechism. So let's look this word up really quick, because it's like when you train people to be obedient. So catechism, to instruct systemically, especially by questions, answers, and explanations and corrections, to give religious instructions in a manner, to question systemically and searchingly. Okay, that's what catechism is. Anywho, who was very zealous in his duty, and many Negroes were instructed and baptized. In 1712, the Negroes in New York conspired to destroy all the English. Now, this is important. It said the Negroes in New York, the ones that they were saying that was sitting down and they was forcing to listen to the sermons in the church that they was doing. It said in 1712, the Negroes in New York conspired to destroy all the English, which greatly discouraged the work of their instructions. The conspiracy was defeated and many Negroes were taken and executed. How y'all talk about religion, but y'all taking Negroes and executing them because they don't want to go to church? You feel me? Mr. New School was blamed as the main occasion of the barbarous plot. Two of Mr. New Schools were charged with the plot. One was cleared and the other was proven to have been in the conspiracy, but guiltless of his master's murder. Upon full trial of the guilty Negroes were found to be such as never come to Miss New School. And what is observable, the persons whose Negroes were found most guilty were such as were declared opposers of making them Christians. I know that I just said that kind of fast, so I'm going to say it again. Because it's saying that they didn't want to be Christians. The Negroes didn't want them to like turn them into Christians. So they rebelled, tried to fight them. Basically, it says, upon full trial of the guilty Negroes were found to be in such as never came to Mr. Newell's school. It's saying they never even went to his school. And what was observable, the persons who Negroes were found most guilty were such as were the declared opposers of making them Christians. In a short time, the cry against the instruction of Negroes subsided. The governor visited and recommended the school. Mr. New died 1722, much regretted by all who knew his labors. He was succeeded by Reverend Mr. Wetmore, who afterwards was appointed missionary to Rye in New York. After his removal, the rector, church wardens, and vestry of Trinity Church in New York City requested another catechist, there being about 1,400 Negro and Indian slaves. What's up, cuz? A considerable number of them had been instructed in the principle of Christianity in the late Mr. New and had received baptism and were communicants of their church. The society complied with this request and sent Mr. Colgan in 1726, who conducted the school with success. Mr. Honeyman, missionary in 1724 in Providence, Rhode Island, had baptized in 2 years 80 persons, in which 19 were grown, 3 Negroes, 2 Indians, 2 mulattoes. The Narragansett, the congregation was reported to be 160 with 12 Indian and black servants. At Marblehead, the missionary reported having baptized 2 Negroes, a man about 25 years old, a girl 12, and the whole family in Salem had conformed to the church. The society looked upon the instruction and conversion of Negroes as a principal branch of their care, esteeming it with great reproach to the Christian name. That so many thousands of persons should continue in the same state of pagan darkness under a Christian government and living in Christian families as they lay before under their own heathen countries. The society immediately from their first institution strove to promote their conversion, and as much as their income would not enable them to send numbers of catechists sufficiently to instruct the Negroes, yet they resolved to do their utmost and at least to give the work the mark of their highest approbation. This writing is so small, y'all. That's why I'm looking like crazy over here. It says, they wrote, therefore, to all their missionaries that they should use their best endeavors at proper times to instruct Negroes, and should especially take occasion to recommend it zealously to the masters to order their slaves at convenient times to come to them that they might be instructed. These directions had a good effect, and some hundreds of Negroes had been instructed, received baptism, and been admitted to the communion, and lived very orderly lives. So they wanted to instruct them to be Christians so that they could lead orderly lives and not have freedom. It's going to get into that even more. It says the history of the society goes on to say it is a matter of commendation to the clergy that they have done thus much in so great and difficult work. But alas, what is the instructions of a few hundred of several years with respect to the many thousands uninstructed, unconverted, living, dying, utter pagans? So if you were not a part of their white Christian religion, they thought that you were pagan, they thought that you were dying, they thought that you were, not worth living if you did not convert to Christianity, right? And follow their instructions. It must be confessed, what have been done is nothing with regard to what a true Christian will hope to see effected. After stating several difficulties in respect to the religious instructions of Negroes, which do not exist at present time but in very limited degree, it is said, but the greatest obstruction is the masters themselves do not consider enough obligation which lies upon them to have their slaves instructed. What this means is they're trying to tell the masters, you need to get them into Christianity because they will be more obedient, they will follow more laws, then you can control them. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. And in another place, the society has always been sensible. The most effectual way to convert Negroes was by engaging their masters through continence and promote their conversion. The Bishop of St. Asaph, Dr. Fleetwood, preached a sermon before the society the year 1711. This is where it gets crazy. Setting forth the day of instructing the Negroes in the Christian religion. So if you're a Negro who they thought was a Negro, a melanated person, they said they have to instruct you to be a Christian. It is a spell or rituals. Facts. It is a spell that they put on our people, and we just cannot even see it because guess what? If you want to hide something from a Negro, you put it in a book. But see, when when you indigenous, you go to the book. You don't be afraid to read these books. You don't care about the book being 300 pages. You be like, okay, let's go. Some people don't have the attention span to sit down and understand this, but when you do, you will never be asleep again because knowledge makes us unfit to be a slave. So they talk about slaves, but we got the knowledge, so we could never be a slave. You can't trick me. You can't trick my people, right? It said the society thought this was so useful a discourse that they printed and dispersed abroad in the plantations great numbers of the sermon. In the same year and in the year 1725, reprinted the same and dispersed again in large numbers. So the sermon where he said, hey, masters, you need to instruct your your Negroes to be Christians, they printed that sermon from 1711 is what he's saying. They printed it in mass amounts. It says the Bishop of London, Dr. Gibson, to whom the care of plantations abroad as the religious affairs was committed, became a second advocate for the conversion of the Negroes and wrote 2 letters on the subject. You need me?
No.
The first in 1727 addressed to the masters and mistresses of families in the English plantations abroad, exhorting them to encourage and promote the instructions of Negroes to the Christian faith. The second in the same year addressed to the missionaries there, directing them to distribute said letter and exhorting them to give their assistance toward the instructions of the Negroes within their several parishes. So they gave it out to all of their people, and they said, hey, we got to tell everybody we have to convert the Negroes to Christian. This is what they were doing. So this is why I say when you allow the enemy to tell you who you are, and you think that they're just giving you Christianity because it's good, then you really are a sheep. You really don't know what's going on. And they got you bamboozled completely. Let's carry on and continue to wake up. The society were persuaded this was the true method to remove the great obstruction to their conversion. And hoping so particularly in application to the masters and mistresses from the seat of London would have the strongest influence. I'm talking about the Church of London. They printed 10,000 copies of the letter to the masters and mistresses, which were sent to all the colonies on the continent and to all the British islands in the West Indies to be distributed among the masters of families and all other inhabitants. The society received accounts that the letters influenced many masters of families to have their servants instructed. Oh yeah, you getting instructed. The Bishop of London soon after wrote an address to serious Christians among ourselves to assist the society of propagating the gospel and carrying on this work. They were sent by the British Crown, facts, to convert us to Christians. Because they knew that would make us obedient and go to work and labor and go to church. The letters of Dr. Gibson referred to for their intrinsic excellence and as an indication of the state of feeling on the subject at the time they were written render it proper that they should be inserted into the sketch. I have not been able to obtain a copy of Dr. Fleetwood's sermon. It says, quote, the Bishop of London's letter to the masters and mistresses of the family in English plantations abroad, exhorting them to encourage and promote the instruction of their Negroes to Christian faith. 1727. The care of the plantation abroad being committed to the Bishop of London as the religious affairs, I have thought it my duty to make particular inquiries into the state of religion in those parts, and to learn, among other things, what number of slaves are employed within several governments, and what means are used for their instruction in the Christian faith. I find the numbers are prodigiously great. A word that I have a hard time pronouncing. And I'm not a little troubled to observe how a small progress has been made in a Christian country towards delivering those poor creatures from the pagan darkness and superstition in which they were bred, and making them partakers of the light of the gospel and the blessing and benefits belonging to it. How is it beneficial for us to be a part of your Christian religion and be a slave? How the hell is that a benefit? But they said they wanted to make us privy to the benefits of being a slave Christian. And which is yet more to be lamented, I find there has been only very little progress made in the work. But all attempts towards it have been too many industriously discouraged and hindered, partly by magnifying the difficulties of work beyond what they really are, and partly by mistaken suggestions of changing which baptism which make in the condition of Negroes to the loss and disadvantage of their masters. Number one, as the difficulties, it may be pleaded that the Negroes are grown persons when they come over, and that having been accustomed to the pagan rites and idolatries of their own country, they are prejudiced against all other religions, and more particularly against the Christians. We were bamboozled. Facts. It says that the Negroes, which is the Indians basically, were against all other religions, especially Christianity. Listen now. It says, as forbidding all licentiousness, which is usually practiced among heathens. So it says that we were against Christianity because it removed our licentiousness. Now, licentiousness was a new word for me. I had to go look it up today. But it basically means like when you become a Christian, you don't really have a license to control your own life, basically. So let me just tell you the real definition. Let's go to the Cambridge Dictionary, right? It says behavior that is sexual in a way uncontrolled, socially unacceptable, right? It's just saying like you kind of got the license to control yourself. But they thought that, hey, we didn't need our own licentiousness, right? But if this were a good argument against attempting the conversion of Negroes, it would follow that gospel is never further to be propagated than it is at present, and that no endeavors are to be used for the conversion of heathens at any time. I'm still here, TikTok. Or in any country whatsoever, because all heathens have been accustomed to pagan rites and idolatries, and to such vicious and licentious living as the Christian religion forbids. So it's basically saying the Christian religion forbid us from having our own consciousness, following our own desires, following our own like when it comes to all types of desires, just having freedom of time, being in control of yourself, having liberty, freedom, peace, having an Epicurus lifestyle, just happiness. It forbid that, the Christian religion. So they're saying we were heathens. We had to be converted. You'll see this is conversion. So when you think you're not being converted, you have been converted. If you are a Christian, you have been converted. Hoodwinked and hypnotized. Facts. Let's carry on. But yet, God be thanked, heathens have been converted. How y'all call somebody heathens? I'm having a problem with that. Let me just focus. Heathens have been converted, and Christianity propagated in all ages, in almost all countries, through the zeal and diligence of pious and good men, and this without the help of miracles. And if the present age be as zealous and diligent in pursuing the proper means of conversions, we have no reason to doubt but that the divine assistance is and will be the same in all ages, run amok. But a further difficulty is that they are the utter strangers to our language, and we to theirs. And the gift of tongues being now ceased, there is no means left of instructing them in the doctrine of Christian religion. And this, I own, is a real difficulty as long as it continues and as far as it reaches. But if I am rightly informed, many Negroes who are grown persons when they come over do of themselves attain so much of our language as enables them to understand and be understood in things which concern the ordinary business of life. And they who can go so far of their own accord might doubtlessly be carried much further if proper methods and endeavors were used to bring them to complete knowledge of our language with a pious view to instructing them in the doctrines of our religion. They keep talking about bringing us into their religion. So now we have taken on this Christian identity. We think this is our religion. We think this is a part of our culture when it's not. You've been converted. You've been tricked, bamboozled. All of that. A spell. At least some of them who are more capable and more serious than the rest might be easily instructed both in our language and religion, and then be made use to convey instruction to the rest of in their own language. So once they get one of us, they use that one person to get the rest of us. That's why you'll have people like, you better go to church, you better get in the you better be a Christian, and then they think that you're a heathen if you're not. This is colonization mindset. They're following this guy's mindset, right? And this one would hope may be done with great ease, wherever there are hearty, sincere zeal for the work. But whatever difficulties there may be in instructing those who are grown up before they are brought over, there are not like difficulties in the ease of their children who are born and bred on our plantations, who have never been accustomed to pagan rites, superstitions, and who may easily be trained up like all other children to any language whatsoever, particularly to our own. If the making them good Christians be sincerely the desire and intention of those who have the property in them and the government over them. Religion is not spirituality. Facts. Did y'all hear that? It says, if the making them good Christians be sincerely the desire and intention of those who have property over them and government over them. The whole purpose of them is to make you a Christian so that you will be obedient. But supposing the difficulties to be much greater than I imagine, they are not such as render the work impossible as to leave no hope in any degree of success, and nothing less than the impossibility of doing any good at all can warrant our giving over and laying aside all means on our endeavors, where the propagation of the gospel and the saving of souls are immediately concerned. Y'all want to save our soul? Come on. They separated the kids from their roots. Facts. And they knew that grown people back during those times would be harder to convert. So they would convert the children. So you'll have a lot of kids growing up baptized, getting converted, and they don't even know they're being bamboozled. They would target the children. Many undertakings look far more impractical before trial than they are afterwards found to be experienced, especially where there is not a good heart to go about them. What? And it is frequently observed that small beginnings, when pursued with resolution, are attended with great and surprising success. But no case is the success more great and surprising than when good men engage in the cause of God and religion, out of the just sense of the inestimable value of a soul, and in full and well-grounded assurances that their honest designs and endeavors for the promoting religion will be supported by a special blessing from God. How y'all thought that? They saying it's a special blessing from God to convert you, for them to control you and be your master. They still do now. Still do until now. I am loath to think so hardly of any Christian master. Just that word alone, just like, what? Christian master? Focus, Dr. Sean. I am loath to think so hardly of any Christian master as to suppose that he can deliberately hinder his Negroes from being instructed in the Christian faith, or which is the same thing, that he can, upon sober and mature consideration of the case, finally resolve to deny them that means and opportunities of instructions. Much less, I believe that he can, after he has seriously weighted this matter, permit them to labor on the Lord's day. And least of all, that he can put them under a kind of necessity of laboring on that day to provide themselves with the convenience of life. Since our religion so plainly teaches us that God has given one day in 7 to be a day of rest, not only to man but to the beast. That is a day appointed by him for the improvement of the soul, as well as the refreshment of the body. They saying that, when they gave you Christianity and they converted you, they had the enslaved people working free, basically for nothing. And when they started to convert them, they said, hey, we got to tell the masters they got to let them rest on this day to refresh their body so we can continue to control their soul. This is going to make it easier for us to control them the rest of the time. The Epstein files expose the U.S. corporations trafficking. Facts. Everything talks about them trafficking, but nothing happens. It's sad as hell. It says, that it is a day appointed by him for the improvement of the soul as well as refreshment of the body, and that it is a duty incumbent upon masters to take care that all persons who are under their government keep this day holy. How? And employ it to the pious and wise purpose for which God, our great Lord and Master, intended it. Nor can I think so hardly of any missionary who shall be desired by the Master to direct and assist in the instructions of his Negroes, either on that day or any other, which he shall be more at leisure, as opposed that he will not embrace such an invitation with the utmost readiness and cheerfulness, and give the help that is fairly consistent with the necessary duties of his function as a parochial minister. If he said that no time can be spared from the daily labor and employment of the Negroes, listen, they're trying to argue with the master to convert us to Christianity, but the master is saying, you know, they got to work 7 days, but they're saying, hey, you need to give them 1 day to go to church so that they can be properly instructed. That's what I'm reading right now. Let's carry on. If it be said that no time can be spared from the daily labor and employment of the Negro, you're working hard, right? To instruct them in the Christian religion, this is in effect to say that no consideration of propagating the gospel of God or saving the souls of men is to make the least abatement from the temporal profits of the master, and that God cannot and will not make up the little they may lose in that way by blessing and prospering their undertakings by sea and land as just reward for their zeal for his glory and salvation of men's souls. In this case, I may well reason, as St. Paul does in a case not unlike it, that if they make you partakers of their temporal things, of their strengths and spirits, and even their offsprings. So it's saying, as a master, if these enslaved people allow you to use their temporal things, meaning their strengths, to work for free, it says their spirits, because they breaking your spirit down, and it says even their offspring. It said if you're using their offspring and their spirit and their strengths to make them work and extract profit, then you should give them time to instruct their spirit. Okay? It says you ought to make them partakers of your spiritual things, though it should abate somewhat from the profit which you might otherwise receive from their labor. And considering the greatness of the profit that is received, so TikTok has restricted my live. They say I'm giving misinformation by reading history. That's kind of crazy. That is really crazy. So it's saying people will not be able to watch your live because you are spreading misinformation. Okay? Yeah, that's what it said, guys. So if you still in here, then yeah. So this is what happens when we get into like teaching ourselves and talking about these type of things. They will restrict you from talking about it because it's about to get too deep. So somebody might have found it's like, wait, you doing too much. And that's why I don't really like, I love TikTok because of the community, but the AI is summarizing everything that I'm saying, and it thinks that I am, because it says summary, analyzing the historical context of conversion and slavery. Comment your thoughts. So it just sucks, but I'm going to keep going. If you hear, just say this is for entertainment purposes. This is for entertainment purposes only, AI. Entertainment purposes only. But it said my live is gonna be restricted, so anywho, let's keep going. Let me see. Chapter 1 is still going on. I still have a lot in this chapter. Um, I just wish it was a platform where we could just talk about history, teach our people, and not have to deal with someone coming on here like, hey, you talking too much, or the AI saying, hey, you telling too much. You know, I just wish that wasn't the case. All right, let me carry on. Let me see where I was at before I got rudely interrupted by TikTok. It says, and considering the greatness of the profit that is received from their laborers, it might be hoped that all Christian masters, those especially who are possessed of considerable numbers, should also be at some small expense in providing for the instructions of these poor creatures. Keep calling us poor creatures. In too deep. Facts. And that others whose numbers are less and who dwell in the same neighborhood should join in expense of common teacher for the Negro belonging to them. The Society for Propagating the Gospel in Foreign Parts are sufficiently sensible of the great importance and necessity of all of such an established and regular provision for the instruction of Negroes, and earnestly wish and pray that it may please God to put into the hearts of good Christians to enable them to insist in the work by seasonal contributions for that end, but at present their fund does scarce enable them to answer the many demands of missionaries for the performance of divine service in the poorer settlements, which are not in condition to maintain them at their own charge. But it is further pleaded that the instructions of heathens in the Christian faith is in order to their baptism, and that not only the time to be allowed for instructing them would be abatement from the profits of their labor, but also that baptizing them when instructed would destroy both the property which the masters have in their slaves brought with their money and the right of selling them again at pleasure, and that the making them Christian only makes them less diligent and more ungovernable. To which it may be very replied, Christianity and the embracing of gospel does not make the least alteration in civil property or in any of the duties which belong to the civil relations. But in all these respects, it continues persons just in the same state as it found them. The freedom which Christianity gives is a freedom from bondage of sin and Satan, and from the dominion of men's lusts and passions and inordinate desires. But as their outward conditions, whatever that was before, whether bond or free, their being baptized and being Christians makes no manner of change in it. As St. Paul has expressly told us, 1 Corinthians 7:20, where he is speaking directly to this point. Let every man abide in the same calling wherein he was called. And at the 24th verse, let every man, wherever he is called, therein abide with God. And so far as Christianity, from discharging men from the duties of the station or condition in which it found them, that it lays them under stronger obligations to perform those duties with the greatest diligence and fidelity, not only from the fear of man, but from a sense of duty to God, and the belief and expectation of future accounts. So that to say that Christianity tends to make men less observant of their duty in any report, and it is reproached that it is very far from deserving, and a reproach that is confuted by the whole tenor of gospel precepts, which inculcates upon all, and particularly upon servants, many of whom were then in the condition of slaves, as faithful and diligent discharge of duties belonging to their several stations of conscience towards God. And it is several stations of consciousness towards God. I already said that. And it is also confuted by our own reason, which tells us how much more forcible and constant the restraint of conscience is than the restraint of fear. And last of all, it is computed by experience, which teaches us the great value of those servants who are truly religious compared to those who have no sense of religion. As to their being more ungovernable after baptism than before, it is certain that gospel everywhere enjoins not only diligence and fidelity, but also obedience for the conscience sake, and does not deprive masters of any proper methods of enforcing obedience. What? Where they appear to be necessary. Okay. Humanity forbid all cruel and barbarous treatment of our fellow creatures, and will not suffer us to consider a being that is endowed with reason on a level with brutes. And Christianity takes not out of the hands of superiors any degrees of strictness and severity that fairly appear to be necessary for preserving subjection and government. The police, facts. That's what they're saying. They can still rule you, beat you, use violence, all these different things, and God says that it's okay. It says the general law, both of humanity and of Christianity, is kindness. Really? Y'all talking about the general law of kindness while you have people enslaved? It doesn't make no sense. Gentleness and compassion towards all mankind, and of what nation or condition soever they be, and therefore we are to make the exercise of those amiable virtues our choice and desire, and to have recourse to sever and vigorous methods unwillingly and only out of necessity, not anymore. And of this necessity you yourselves remain the judges, as much after they receive baptism as before. It's saying even if we convert them, if you're a master, you're the judge of them. So that you can be in no danger of suffering by change. And as to them, the greatest hardship that most severe master can inflict upon them is not to be compared to the cruelty of keeping them in the state of heathenism and depriving them of the means of salvation as reached forth to all mankind in the gospel of Christ. And in truth, one great reason why severity is at all necessary to maintain government is the want of religion in those who are to be governed, and who therefore are not to be kept to the duty by anything but fear and terror, than which there cannot be more uneasy state either to those who govern or those who are governed. That was a confusing paragraph. It says that these things may make the greatest impression upon you. Let me beseech you to consider yourselves not only as masters. We won. It said not only as masters, but as Christian masters. What? Who stand obliged by your profession to do all that your station and condition enable you to do towards breaking the power of Satan and enlarging the kingdom of Christ, and as having a great opportunity put into your hands of helping on this work by the influence of which God has given you over such a number of heathen idolaters, who will still continue under dominion of Satan. In the next place, let me beseech you to consider them not barely as slaves and upon the same level with laboring beasts, but as men slaves, women slaves, who have the same frame and faculties with yourselves, and have souls capable of being made eternally happy, and reason and understanding to receive instructions in order to it. If they came from abroad, let it not be said that they are far from the knowledge of Christ in a Christian country, as when they dealt among pagan idolaters. This is crazy. If they had if they have been born among you and have never breathed air but that of a Christian country, let them not be as much strangers to Christ as if they had been transplanted as soon as born into the country of pagan idolaters. Hoping that these and like considerations will move you to lay this matter seriously to heart and excite you to use the best means in your power towards so good and pious work. I cannot omit to suggest to you one of the best motives that can be used for disposing the heathens to embrace Christianity is that is and that is the good lives of Christians. Let them see in you and your families examples of sobriety, temperance, and chastity, and all the other virtues and graces of Christian life. Because you're talking about Christian masters. Let them observe how strictly you oblige yourself and all that being to you to abstain from cursing and swearing, and to keep the Lord's day in the ordinance which Christ have appointed in gospel. Make them sensible by the general tenor of your behavior and conversion that your inward temper and disposition is such as the gospel requires, that that is to say, mild, gentle, and merciful, and that as often as you exercise vigor and severity, it is wholly owing to their idleness and obstinacy. It's kind of blurred, so I can't really read that little part. It says, by these means you will open their heart to instruction and prepare them to receive the truth of the gospel, to which if you add a pious endeavor and concern to them daily instructed, you may become the instrument of saving many souls, and will not only secure a blessing from God upon your undertakings in this world, but entitle yourselves to distinguished reward in the next, which will be given to all those who have been zealous in their endeavors to promote salvation of men and enlarge the kingdom of Christ. And that you may be found in that number at the great day of accounts is the sincere desire and earnest prayer of your faithful friend. It says, the Bishop of London's letter to the missionaries in the English plantation, exhorting them to give their assistance towards the instruction of Negroes of the several parishes in the Christian faith. It says, good brother, having understood by many letters from the plantations and by accounts of persons who have come from thence, that have very little progress have hitherto been made to the conversion of the Negro to the Christian faith, I have thought it proper for me to lay before the masters and mistresses the obligations they are under to promote and encourage the pious and necessary work. This I have done in a letter directed to them, of which you will receive several copies in order to be distributed to those who have Negroes in your parish. I must entrust you when they put the letter in their hand to enforce the design of it by any arguments that you shall think proper to be used, and also to assure them of your own assistance in carrying on the work. I am aware of the plantations where the parishes are so large extent, the care and labor of the parochial ministers may be great, but yet I persuade myself that many vacant hours have been spared from the other pastoral duties to be bestowed on this, and I cannot doubt on the readiness of every missionary in his own parish to promote and further the work so charitable to the souls of men and so agreeable to the great end and design of his mission. As those ministers who have Negroes of their own, what? I cannot but esteem it to their indispensable duty to use their best endeavors to instruct them in the Christian religion in order to their being baptized, both because such Negroes are their proper and immediate care, and because it is vain to hope that other masters and mistresses will exert themselves in this work. If they see it wholly neglected but coldly pursued in the families of the clergy, so that any degree or neglect on your part in the instructions of your own Negro would not only be withholding them from inestimable benefits of Christianity, but would evidently tend to the obstructing and defeating the whole design in every other family. Ooh, this is a lot, guys. And then TikTok done banned me. Carry on. I would also hope that the school masters in the several parishes, part of whose businesses it is to instruct youth in the principles of Christianity, might contribute some. Wait a minute. Hold on. I just read something crazy. It says, I would hope that the school masters in several parishes, part of whose business is to instruct youth on the principle of Christianity, might contribute somewhat towards the carrying on of this work by being ready to bestow upon it some of their leisure time, especially upon the Lord's Day, when both they and the Negroes are most at liberty, and the clergy are taken up with the public duties of their function. And though it says, and though the assistance they give to this pious design should not meet with any reward from men, yet their comfort may be that it is the work of God and will assuredly be rewarded by him. Unless they are obliged to this on account of any reward they receive from men, the greater their reward will be from the hands of God. Get something to drink. Facts. Good idea. Let me take a sip. Great idea. Chapter 1 is long. This is why they say if you want to hide something, you put it in a book, because we over halfway done though, but I'm just saying. I'm just interested to get to the part 3, but I have to read the beginning first. We're not doing part 3 tonight though. It said, I must therefore entreat you to recommend it to them in my name, and to dispose them by all proper arguments and persuasion to turn their thoughts seriously to it, and to be always ready to offer and lend their assistance at their leisure hours. And so, not doubting your ready and zealous concurrence in promoting this important work, and earnestly begging a blessing from God upon this and all your other pastoral labors, I remain your affectionate friend and brother. London, May 19, 1727. Dean Stanhope of Canterbury states in his sermon 1714 that success had attended the efforts of society, and speaks of children, servants, and slave catechized. So they basically saying in that paragraph we have to be consistent, get something to drink. They're just saying if you a teacher, you need to be teaching the kids Christianity, basically. Bishop Berkeley was in the colony of Rhode Island from 1728 to 1730, and he also preached a sermon before the society February 18 to 1731, in which he thus speaks of the Negroes. So they in church, they in their communities talking about the Negroes and how to turn us into Christians. So that's what they're talking about in their church. Hey, you need to be converting. They're talking to the masters. Hey, you need to convert your Negroes because that's going to make them better. You need to give them a day off and do it on a holy day because you still in control. Like, this is psychotic stuff, guys. That's why they said you need to be sober, because they were on drugs. They were just alcoholics, drug addicts, evil people, you know, etc., etc. This is for entertainment purposes only. AI on TikTok. Even though I'm reading from a real book. Anywho, the Negroes in the government of Rhode Island are about half as many more than the Indians, and both together scarce amount to a seventh part of the whole colony. The religion of these people, as is natural to suppose, takes after that of their masters. Some few are baptized, several frequent the different assemblies, and far the greater part none at all. Ooh, it says as ancient antipathy to the Indians, whom it seems our first planters, therein as in certain other particulars affecting the imitate Jews rather than Christians, imagine they had the right to treat on the foot of Canaanites or Amalekites, together with the irrational contempt of the blacks, as creatures of another species who had no right to be instructed or admitted to the sacraments, have proved a main obstacle to the conversion of these poor people. Rejects from Spain, Britain, Europe, devil, blood, and gene written all over their DNA. Facts. It says the main obstacle, they always talking about conversion of these poor people. So they thought that we were poor people, savages, because we weren't following their religion. You see how they brainwash their people to try to trick us, and now we trick, bamboozled. Half of our people bamboozled. We were the food growers. Facts. That was a kind of crazy paragraph right there. It said the ancient antipathy to the Indians, whom it seems our first planters, the food growers, owners of the land, therein as in certain other particulars affecting to imitate Jews rather than Christians. Imagine they had a right to treat on the foot of Canaanites or Amalekites, together with an irrational contempt of the blacks, a creature of another species. No. We the same. We are the Indians, who had no right to be instructed or admitted to the sacraments, have proved a main obstacle to the conversion of poor people. To this may be added an erroneous notion that the being baptized is inconsistent with a state of slavery. To undeceive them in this particularly, which had too much weight, it seemed a proper step, if the opinion of the Majesty's Attorney and Solicitor General could be procured. This opinion they charitably sent over, signed with their own hands, which was accordingly printed in Rhode Island and dispersed through the plantations. I heartily wish it may produce the intended effect. It must be owned our reformed planters, with respect to the natives and the slaves, might learn from the Church of Rome how it is their interest and duty to behave. Both French and Spaniards take care to instruct both them and their Negroes in the popish religion, to the reproach of those who profess a better. From the proposal to establish a college in Bermuda, first published 1725, the bishop remarks, now the clergy sent over to America have proved too many of them very meanly qualified, both in learning and morals, for the discharge of their office, and indeed little can be expected from the example or instruction of those who quit their native country on no other motive than that they are not able to procure a livelihood in it, which is known to be the case. To this may be imputed the small care that have been taken to convert Negroes of our plantation, who to the infamy of England and the scandal of the world continue heathen under Christian masters and in Christian countries, which would never be if our planters were rightly instructed and made sensible that they disappointed their own baptism by denying it to those who belong to them. It says that it would be of advantage to their affairs to have slaves who should obey in all things their masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in singleness of heart as fearing God, that gospel liberty consists with temporal servitude, and that their slaves will only become better slaves by being Christians. Oh my God. It'd be the little sentences like that. We are the indigenous American Indian people. Facts. We are not from Africa. We fed them. Facts. Did y'all just hear what this thing said? Hold on, I gotta take a sip of water. Hold the heck on. Now see, that one sentence right there on page 29 of this book, it just sum it all up. I'm gonna read it again because it's these little pieces right here that have me like, wow.
What do you mean by that?
What do y'all mean by that? They said the gospel of liberty consists with temporal servitude. Hey, clip this. That their slaves will become better slaves by becoming Christian. Now, if you don't take nothing else I said out of this whole thing, I'm not even done yet. Just think about that. They said that you got to give them Christianity because this is going to make them a better slave. Let's carry on. In 1741, Archbishop Secker, after enumerating other successes, adds, in less than 40 years, great multitudes on the whole of Negroes and Indians brought over to the Christian faith. They were excited about bringing, they keep saying Negroes and Indians, but it's just Indians. They're trying to separate the two. That's why they always put us Negroes, Indians. We really just the indigenous people. It said in 40 years they have made great success in bringing and converting us to Christians. Okay? It says Bishop Drummond in 1754. Now all of this is before there was even a government over here. They were converting us to Christians before they even had a United States government. This was a time when they had slave raiding and slave catching and plantation and trafficking. They were converting us to Christians because they said it would make us better slaves. Okay. It says Bishop Drummond in 1754 notices the Negroes in his sermon before the society and insists upon the duty and safety of giving them the gospel. The amiable Porteous 1783 when Bishop of Chester, afterwards Bishop of London, okayed a lively interest in this work and preached a sermon before the society in support of which may be found in his work. So they preaching sermons about how to turn us into Christian slaves. This is what y'all talking about? Catholic Church. In the year 1783, this is still before the invention of the United States government was even formed. It says 1783 and the following, soon after the separation of the colonies from the mother country, the society's operations ceased, leaving all the colonies, 43 missionaries, two of whom were in southern states, one in the north, one in the south. The affectionate valediction of the society to them was issued in 1785. Thus terminated the connection of this noble society with our country, which from the foregoing notices of its efforts must be accomplished a great deal for the religious instructions of Negro population. Thus it is perceived that the Negroes were forgotten by the Church of Christ in England. Were they remembered by the Church of Christ in the colonies themselves? We have no record of missions or missionary stations established by or in any of the colonies in behalf exclusively of the Negro up to the year 1738. 1738, the Moravian or United Brethren were first who formally attempted to establish the missions exclusively to the Negroes. A succinct account of their several efforts down to the year 1790 is given in the report of the Society for the Propagation of the Gospel Among the Heathens at Salem, North Carolina, October 5th, 1837, by Reverend Renatus Smith, and is as follows. So they in church, they in their church talking about us and how they gonna turn us into Christians so we can be more obedient. You got to be kidding me. This can't be what y'all was talking about. Like what? It says, this is a sermon from Reverend J. Renata Smith, and it is as follows, and it's quote, 100 years have now elapsed since the renewed Church of the Brethren first attempted to communicate the gospel to the many thousand Negroes on our land. In 1737, Count Zendorf paid a visit to London and formed an acquaintance with the General Oglethorpe and the trustees of Georgia, with whom he conferred on the subject of the mission to the Indians, which the Brethren had already established in the colony in 1735. Some of these gentlemen were associates under the will of Dr. Bray, who had left funds to be devoted to the conversion of Negro slaves in South Carolina. And they solicited the Count to procure them some missionaries for this purpose. On his objecting that the Church of England might hesitate to recognize the ordination of the Brethren's missionary, they referred the question to the Archbishop of Canterbury, Dr. Potter, who gave his opinion that the Brethren, being members of the Episcopal Church, whose doctrines contain nothing repugnant to the 39 Articles, ought not to be denied free access to the heathen. This declaration not only removed all hesitation from the minds of the trustees as the present application, but opened the way for the laborers of the Brethren amongst the slave population of the West Indies, and great and blessed work, which has, by the gracious help of God, gone on increasing even to the present day. The same year, Brother Peter Bocher was deputed to commence the desired mission with Brother George Suches as his assistant. They set out by the way of London on February 1738 and repaired in the first instance to Georgia, hoping to provide which means for the prosecution of their journey by the colony of the Brethren already established there. It says, obstacles, however, being interposed through the interested views of certain individuals, this mission failed, and Brethren settling in Petersburg took charge of Swiss colonists and their children in that town, Georgia not being at the period of slave-holding colony. In 1739, Suchilas departed his life. Peter Bocher immigrated 1740 to Pennsylvania with the whole Georgia colony, of which he was minister, because they were required to bear arms in the war against the Spaniards, which had recently broken out. In 1747 and 1748, some brethren belonging to Bethlehem undertook several long and difficult journeys through Maryland, Virginia, and the borders of North Carolina in order to preach the gospel to the Negroes, who generally speaking received it with eagerness. Various proprietors, however, avowing their determination not to suffer strangers to instruct their Negroes, as they had their own ministers, whom they paid for that purpose, and brethren ceased from their efforts. It appears from the letters of the brother Spangenberg, who spent greater part of the year 1749 at Philadelphia and preached the gospel to the Negroes in that city, that the labors of the brethren amongst them were not entirely fruitless. Thus he writes 1751, on my arrival in Philadelphia, I saw numbers of Negroes still buried in all the native ignorance and darkness, and my soul was grieved for them. What? Soon after, some of them came to me requesting instructions, at the same time acknowledging their ignorance in the most affecting manner. They begged a weekly sermon might be delivered expressly for their benefit. I complied with their request and confined myself to the most essential truths of Scripture. Upwards of 70 Negroes attended on those occasions, whom were powerfully awake It's kind of blurred out, and expressed a desire to be united with Christ and his church by the sacrament of baptism, which was accordingly administered to them. At the Provincial Synod, which was held in Pennsylvania 1747, Brother Christian Frolic was commissioned to take charge of the Negroes in New York, who had evinced a great desire for gospel and whom several had already won for the Redeemer by means of attendance on the ministry of the word. In 1751, he visited scattered Negroes in New Jersey, by whom he was everywhere received with joy and preached Christ crucified to 100 of them at once with considerable effect, besides conversing with them at their work. A painting is preserved at Bethlehem in which the 18 first fruits from the heathen who had been brought to Christ by instrumentality of the brethren and had departed in the faith prior to the year 1747 and represented dressed in their native costume, standing before the throne of Christ with palms in their hand and the inscription beneath. There are redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and the Lamb. Among the number are Johannes, a Negro of South Carolina, Jupiter, a Negro from New York. The graves of colored Christians who have died in the Lord are also met with the several of our burial grounds in North American congregations. Woo! This is a long chapter, y'all. But I gotta get through it. Okay? It says, at the request of Mr. Knox, the English Secretary of State, an attempt was made to evangelize the Negroes at Georgia. In 1774, the brethren Louis Muller of the Academy of Niesky and George Wagner were called to North America, and in the year following, having been joined by brother Andrew Bosing of North Carolina, they took their abode to Knoxboro, a plantation so called from its proprietor, the gentleman mentioned above. They were, however, almost constant sufferers from the fevers which prevailed in those parts, and Muller finished his course in October of the same year. He had preached the gospel with acceptance to both whites and blacks, yet without any abiding results. The two remaining brethren called upon to bear arms on the breaking of the War of Independence. Brosbein repaired to Wachovia in North Carolina, and Wagner set out in 1789 for England. In the great Northampton revival under the preaching of Dr. Edwards in 1735 and 6, when for the space of 5 or 6 weeks together the conversion averaged at least 4 a day, Dr. Edwards remarks, there are several Negroes who, from what was seen in them then and what is discernible in them since, appear to have been truly born again in the late remarkable season. At a meeting of the General Association of the Colony of Connecticut, 1738, it was inquired whether the infant slaves, what? Hold on. It says, at the meeting of General Association of the Colony of Connecticut, 1738, it was inquired whether the infant slaves of Christian masters may be baptized in the right of their master, they solemnly promising to train them in the nurture and abomination of the Lord, and whether it is the duty of such masters to offer such children and thus religiously to promise. Both questions were affirmatively answered. Records as reported by Reverend what? So they trying to see if the Christian masters could baptize the infant slaves. That whole paragraph just like, what the hell? What the hell? What?
Oh, hell no, man. What the?
On the condition edition of the Negroes about this time in New England, it has been said their lot was far from being severe. They were often brought by conscious persons for the purpose of being well instructed in the Christian religion. They had universally the enjoyment of the Sabbath as a day of rest or devotion. Looking over old records of intricacies of publications, i.e., for marriages, within the town of Boston, I observed the following among others. It says 1707, Negro Essex, a man of Mr. William Clark, Esquire, Negro. It says 1710, Negroes, Charles and Peggy, Negro servants of Mr. James, Negro Jack, Negro servant of, it's just going down a list of people. 1747, efforts for the religious instruction of Negroes continued through a series of years were made by Presbyterians in Virginia. They commenced with Reverend Samuel Davies, afterward President Nassau Hall, and Reverend John Todd of Hanover Presbytery. Mr. Davies began his ministry in Hanover 1747 and left Virginia about 1773. Mr. Davies, 4 or 5 years after his settlement in Hanover, found it impossible to afford even a monthly supply of preaching to the congregations organized by him. Accordingly, he sought an assistant in Mr. Todd, a young preacher from Pennsylvania who was installed in the upper part of Hanover. They're still after kids, facts. And the thing is, you'll see there all these reverends and preachers are talking about converting the Negro. So it's not hard to see how Christianity only made you a better slave. So if you think Christianity did anything else, they're telling you what it did. You just gotta listen, use discernment, and not be like, well, no. They're telling you what they did. It says, in a letter addressed to a friend and member of the Society of London from promoting Christian knowledge among the poor. What? In the year 1755, he thus expresses himself: the poor, neglected Negroes, who are so far from having money to purchase books, that they themselves are the property of others. That's what it says. It says, the poor, neglected Negroes, who are so far from having money to purchase books, that they themselves are the property of others, who were originally African savages and never heard of the name Jesus or his gospel until they arrived at the land of their slavery in America. You see how they lie? Whom their masters generally neglect and whose souls none care for, as though immortality were not a privilege common to them. As with their masters, these poor unhappy Africans is what they saying. Now they saying Africans. They done stop saying Negro Indians, now they saying Africans. Okay? Are objects of my compassion, and I think the most proper objects of the society's charity. The inhabitants of Virginia are compared to be about 300,000 men, the one half of which number are supposed to be Negroes. The number of those who attend my ministry at particular times is uncertain, but generally about 300 who give a stated attendance. And never have I been so struck with the appearance of an assembly as when I have gleaned my eye to that part of the meeting house where they usually sit, adored for so as it appeared to me, with so many black countenances, eagerly attentive to every word they hear and frequently bathed in tears. A considerable number of them, about 100, have been baptized after a proper time for instruction has given them credible evidence not only of their acquaintances with the importance of doctrine of the Christian religion, but also a deep sense of their minds, attested by a life of strict piety and holiness. As they are not sufficiently published to dissemble with a good grace, they express the sentiments of their souls so much in the language of simple nature and which such genuine indications of sincerity that it is impossible to suspect their professions, especially when attended with a truly Christian life and exemplary conduct. There are multitudes of them in different places who are willing and eagerly desirous to be instructed and embrace every opportunity of acquainting themselves with the doctrines of gospel. And though they have generally very little help to learn to read, yet to my agreeable surprise, many of them, by dint of application in their leisure hours, have made progress that then they can intelligibly and read plain author and especially their Bibles. And pity it is that any of them should be without them. Mr. Davies furnished the Negroes with what books he could procure for them, and I require a supply from the Society of Bibles, and what psalms and hymns. Having received a supply, he distributed them to the great joy of Negroes. The books were all very acceptable, but none more than the psalms and hymns, which enabled them to gratify their particular taste and for psalmody. Sundry of them had lodged all night in my kitchen, and sometimes I have awakened about 2 or 3 in the morning. A torrent of sacred harmony has poured into my chamber and carried my mind away to heaven. In this seraphic exercise, some of them spend almost the whole night. I wish, sir, you and other benefactors could hear some of the sacred concerts. I am persuaded it will surprise and please you more than an oratorio or St. Celia's Day. He observed, the Negroes, above all the human species that I have ever knew, have an ear for music and a kind of ecstatic delight in psalmody. And there are no books they learn so soon or take so much pleasure in as those used in the heavenly part of divine worship. On one sacramental occasion, he had pleasure of seeing 40 of them around the table of the Lord, all whom made a credible profession of Christianity. Several of them gave unusual evidence of sincerity, and he believed that more than 1,000 Negroes attended his ministry at different places where he alternately officiated. Mr. Davies writes Dr. Bellamy in 1757, what little success I have lately had, has been chiefly among the extreme of gentlemen and Negroes. Indeed, God has been remarkable working among the latter. I have baptized about 150 adults, and at the last sacramental solemnity, I had the pleasure of seeing the table graced with about 60 black faces. They generally behave well as far as I can hear, though there are some instances of apostasy among them. The countries in which Mr. Davies labored were Hanover, Henrico, Goochland, Caroline, and Louisa. The Society for Propagating the Gospel in Foreign Parts, already noticed, in 1745 established a school in Charleston, South Carolina, under the direction of Commissionary Garden. It flourished greatly and seemed to answer the utmost wishes. It had about 60 scholars and went forth annually about 20 young Negroes, well instructed in the English language and the Christian faith. These schools were established in St. Philip's Church, and some of its scholars were living in 1822 of orderly and decent characters. The year 1747 was marked by the colony of Georgia by the authorized introduction of slaves. 23 representatives from different districts met in Savannah, Georgia, and after appealing Major Horton president, they entered into sundry resolution, the substance of which was the owners of slaves should educate young and use every possible means of making religious impressions upon the minds of the age, and that all acts of humanity should be punished by civil authority. Okay? So when Georgia was able to, when they introduced slaves into Georgia, one of the first things they said was, hey, you got to make every impression to convert them to Christians, basically. Uh-oh. We getting down to the wire. I can't believe I read all of this. All right, so 1764, the Reverend Ezra Stiles D.D. afterwards, president of Yale College, and Dr. Samuel Hopkins undertook the education of two apparently promising Negroes with a view to ministry. But it was finally a failure, Dr. Plummer's report. It says 1770, while Dr. Stiles was pastor in Newport, Rhode Island, there were many African slaves in that town. Of 80 communicants in his church in that town, 7 were Negroes. These occasionally met by his direction for religious improvement in his study. Methodism was introduced into this country in New York, 1766, and the first missionaries were sent out by Mr. Wesley, 1769. One of these, Mr. Pillmore, in a letter to Mr. Wesley from New York in 1770 says, "The number of blacks that attend the preaching affects me much." The first regular conference was held in Philadelphia, 1773. Number of ministers, 10. Number and members, 1,160. From this year to 1776, there was a great revival of religion in Virginia under the preaching of the Methodists in connection with Reverend Mr. Jarrett of the Episcopal Church, which spread through the 14 counties of Virginia, 2 in North Carolina. One letter states the chapel was full of white and black. Another, hundreds of Negroes were among them with tears streaming down their faces. At Roanoke, another remarks, in general, the white people were within the chapel and the black people without. In 1780, at the 8th conference in Baltimore, the following question appeared in minutes. Ought not the assistant to meet the colored people himself and appoint helpers in his absence proper white person, and not suffer them to stay late and meet by themselves? And a yes, under the preaching of Garrett in Maryland, hundreds of both white and black expressed their love for Jesus. 1786, the first return of colored members distinct from white occurs in the minutes of the year. Then yearly afterwards, white 18,791, colored 1,800. It will be perceived from the above, says Dr. Binks in his History of the Methodist Episcopal Church, that a considerable number of colored persons had been received into the church and were to return in the minutes of conference. Hence, it appears that at an early period of Methodist ministry in this country, it had turned its attendance to this part of population. Mr. Rankin, writing on the general state of Methodism in the colonies at the commencement of hostilities, observes, in May 1777, we had 40 preachers in different circuits and about 7,000 members in the society, besides many hundreds of Negroes who were convinced of sin, and many of them happy in the love of God. Life of Coke. What? In the year 1786, the following, where am I? In the year 1786, the following case of conscience was overtured from Donegal Presbytery in the Saints of New York and Philadelphia, namely. It says, quote, whether Christian masters or mistresses ought in duty to have such children baptized as are under their care, though born of parents not in the communion or any Christian church. Upon this overture, the Saints are of opinion that Christian masters, clip this, it says, under this overture, the Saints are of the opinion that Christian masters and mistresses whose religious professions and conducts are such as to give them right to the ordinance of baptism for their own children may and ought to dedicate the children of their household to God in that ordinance when they have no scruple of conscience in contrary. I don't know what that means. On the next page, page 414, it was overturned. Whether Christian slaves having children at the entire direction of unchristian masters and not having it in their power to instruct them in religion are bound to have them baptized, and whether a gospel minister in this predicament ought to baptize them. The sink determined the question in the affirmative. 1787. The minutes of the Methodist Conference for this year furnished the following question and answer indicative of continued interest in colored population. What direction shall we give for the promotion of spiritual welfare of the colored people? Answer. We conjure all our ministers and preachers by the love of God and the salvation of souls, and do require them all by all the authority that is invested in us to leave nothing undone for the spiritual benefit and salvation of them within their respective circles or districts, and for the purpose of embracing every opportunity of inquiring into the state of their souls, and to unite the society those who appear to have real desire of fleeing from the wrath to come, to meet such in class and to exercise the whole Methodist disciple among them. Number of colored members 3,893. 1790. Again, question. What can be done in order to instruct poor children, white and black, to read? Answer. Let us labor as the heart of soul of no man to establish Sunday schools in and near the place of public worship. Let persons to be appointed by the bishop, elders, and deacons and preachers to teach gratis all that will attend and have a capacity to learn from 6 o'clock in the morning till 10, and from 2 p.m. to 6, where it does not interfere with public worship. What the hell? So they then said, okay, we're going to teach them. They have to go to Sunday school from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then it says from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And they still had to go to the worship. What the hell? The council shall compile a proper school book to teach them learning and piety. The experiment was made but proved unsuccessful and discontinued. Number of colored members this year, 11,682. The Methodist is the only denomination which has preserved returns of the number of colored members in its connection. I find it impossible to make any estimate of the number of connections with other denominations. The Methodists met with more success during the period of the middle and southern states than the northern, and they paid particular attention to the Negroes. Large numbers were brought under their influence. The first Baptist church in this country was founded in The first Baptist church in this country was founded in Providence, Rhode Island by Roger Williams in 1639, nearly 100 years after the settlement of America. Wow. Only 17 Baptist churches has arisen in it. The Baptist church in Charleston, South Carolina was founded 1690. The denomination advanced slowly through the middle and southern states, and in 1790 it had churches in them all. Revivals of religion enjoyed, particularly one in Virginia, which commenced in 1785 and continued until 1791 and 1792. Thousands were converted. Clip this. Thousands were converted and baptized, besides many who jumped the Methodist and Presbyterian. A large number of Negroes were admitted to the Baptist church during the seasons of revival, as well as ordinary occasions. They were, however, not gathered into churches, distinct from the whites, such as the Pennsylvania, except in Georgia. Brief notices of churches composed exclusively of Negroes will be given in the second period of this sketch. Before the revolution of Negroes in Virginia attended in crowds the Episcopal Church, there being no other denomination of Christians of consequences in the state. It says, but upon the introduction of other denominations, they went off to them. Old Robert Carter, or Counselor, or King Carter, as he was commonly called, among the richest men in the state, owning, clip this, old Robert Carter, or Counselor King Carter, as he was commonly called, among the richest men in the state, owning some 700 to 800 slaves and large tracts of land, built Christ Church in Lancaster County, Virginia. Now, this sentence alone should shock you. It should make you feel like, what the hell? He owned almost 1,000 people, but he built a church. I'm trying to figure out how Christian masters are building churches, because guess what? They want to be able to control their slaves. Because guess what? Christianity makes you a better slave, they say. So he built a church. Once they caught on, they was like, hey, we build a church. They convert. And now they're easy. Now they're docile. Now they go to work. Now they go to labor. Now they go to Sunday school. Now they fall in line. Now they're in the box. Right? It says, he built Christ Church in Lancaster County, Virginia, and reserved 1/4 of his servants and tenants. He himself baptized and afterwards emancipated a large number of Negroes, and living 14 and 15 years of Baptists, embraced and died in the faith of Swedenborg. The independence of American colonies was acknowledged and peace established 1783. The Articles of Confederation 1778 were superseded by our present Constitution 1787, from the ratification of which to present time our country has been rapidly advancing in prosperity. From the beginning of our controversies with mother country to the breaking out of the Revolutionary War, throughout the period of that arduous struggle, and from its close, throughout the period of national exhaustion, loss of public credit, derangement in trade, political excitement, conflicting opinions, to the ratification of the Constitution, a period of near 20 years, the colonies suffered immeasurably in a moral and religious point of view. And the notices during this period of the state of the churches and of the progress of the gospel are gloomy. Some of them are the gloomiest character. Of course, the Negroes suffer in common with the rest of the population. A few remarks suggest, hold on, we almost done. A few remarks suggested by the facts embraced in the first period of our sketch shall bring it to a conclusion. The religious condition of the colonies up to the period of the Revolution, taken on the whole, was not one remarkable for its prosperity, notwithstanding there had been some rivals of religion. The New England colonies were in respect to a supply of ministers and religious privileges an improvement beyond all rest. But the whole country was in a forming state, but recently settled, every year receiving fresh colonists from abroad, and older settlers pushing their way into new and unexplored regions, while repeated wars with the Indians and wars with the French, the Dutch, the Spaniards, through different portions into protracted, distressing, and injurious commotion. Agriculture, commerce, manufactures, and the arts were but in their infancy. The general conduct of the mother country in regard to the government of colonies and the policy to be pursued towards them was wretched, sometimes contradictory, frequently oppressive and injurious, and contrary to the wishes of the colonists. Such being the state of affairs, we ought not to anticipate any remarkable degree of attention to the religious instruction of the Negro within the colonies as an independent class of population, especially too as the effort of the slave trade during its existence was to harden the feelings against the unfortunate subjects of it, while their degraded and miserable appearance character their stupidity, their uncouth languages, and gross superstitions, and their constant occupation operated as so many checks to benevolent efforts for their conversion to Christianity. And thus, those who advocated the slave trade on the ground that is and introduced the Negroes to the blessings of civilization and the gospel saw their favorite argument losing its force in great measures from year to year. The fact, however, is worthy of remembrance that while the Indians, some of whom received us as guests and sold us their lands at almost no compensation at all, why y'all lying? Ain't nobody sell y'all no land for no compensation. You stole it. And others were driven back to make us room. And with whom we had frequently bloody wars, we became from time to time mutual scourges, received some eminent missionaries from the colonists, and had no considerable interest awakened for their conversion. The Africa who were brought over and brought by us for servants, and who wore out their lives as such, enriching thousands from the Massachusetts to Georgia, were members of our households, never received colonists themselves as solitary missionary exclusivity devoted to their good. Nor was there ever a single society established within the colonies that we know of with the express design of promoting their religious instruction. Woo! It says, in conclusion, the conclusion, however, would be unwarrantable that they were wholly neglected. The language of President Davy, that no man cared for their souls, must be received with abatement. For, it says, for their souls must be received with abatement. For they had attracted the serious attention of societies in Europe and the men eminent for wisdom, learning, and piety. And able appeals were written to promote their religious instruction. And some attempts were made to send over missionaries and also to engage the services of the settled clergy in their behalf, and the Church of England in this good work taking the lead. We are certified also the efforts were made for their instruction, especially in the southern colonies. To some extent, desire and attempt the instruction of their households, and that the settled as well as ministers did not wholly neglect them. Clip this. Many Negroes were received into churches from one end of the colonies to the other, and the rest and privileges of the lords they were secured to them either by custom or law. We see occasionally notice in the proceedings of ecclesiastical associations. There were catechetical schools and schools for teaching them to read in a few places. The Negroes were allowed to read. Books were upon occasion distributed to them, but the privileges of education were gradually discouraged and withheld, more particular in those colonies and states containing large populations of them, whose policy was to perpetuate the system of slavery. Were it possible for us to obtain all the ministers of various denominations through the colonies who flourished during these 170 years, report of their regular pastor laborers, such as have been furnished by a few, it might possibly appear that the Negroes received the largest share of religious instructions. Upon consideration of the facts now before us, many would be led to imagine. And that is chapter 1 on religious instruction of the Negro. Okay? And I've been on here for a long time, so you guys can kind of see where we're going with this. Yeah. So you can see where we're going with this. You can see how, hey, if you thought that you didn't know how your grandparents were Indians and how you became a Christian, this book tell you everything. Their whole mission from the beginning was to send that letter to the colonists, to the masters and their wives, to say, hey, if you want better slaves, you must convert them to Christianity. So if you're a Christian and you think that this was done because, oh, colonizers wanted to be nice. No, they said, this is going to make you, under their spell, basically. So, I don't know if we'll get into chapter 2 tomorrow. Let me just see how long chapter 2 is. I'm not doing it tonight for sure. Chapter 2. It's not that long. So, we definitely could do chapter 2 tomorrow. And then we'll continue on and do one chapter a day. And if you miss any of these chapters and you want to continue, reading this book with me as part of our little book club. I was doing this last year, this book club, but I kind of stopped. Now I'm back at it. So if you want to read with us, you can follow my YouTube. I'm going to put it into like a series where we read each chapter. Because I really want to get to the end of the book. Let me see. But I feel like I need more context. But I'm really trying to get to, let me see what chapter I'm trying to get to. I want to get to part 2, where it's talking about the moral and religious conditions of the Negroes. It's going to talk about the first disadvantage, circumstances which affect their moral and religious conditions, like clothing. It's just studying us so deeply. It's just studying, making us religious, like so deeply. That's why I'm reading this, because I need to know all the facts. So tomorrow we will continue with chapter 2. And yeah, this is Dr. Cheetah's Sunflower for the Hood to Hood podcast. That was a big introduction. Thank you to everyone who stopped by. Tap those hearts on TikTok. Even though we got banned on TikTok, we got 12.3K hearts. That's what I'm talking about. 12.3K hearts. Y'all showed out on the hearts. And I know this is a lot. Thank you for subscribing on YouTube. And yeah, make sure y'all catch the replay. I'm about to get up off of here. That was a lot. I learned a lot. And that's why, they say, hey, you want to hide something from us, put it in the book, because this is 302 pages in this book. But they're talking to each other, sharing information about us. Everything is about the Negro Indian in this book. It's like, hey, how do we control them? What are they doing? How many of them is it? How many converted? How many got baptized? We got to train up ministers. We got to train some of them to be ministers. So now you see we do religion on our own. They don't even have to tell us to do it. We just do it. But before, it was a fight against it. But now it's like, oh no, we're Christians. So they're like, yeah, we got them. As long as they keep you there, everything else about you falls in line. You're gonna go to work. You're gonna go to church. Like they said, back then they didn't even want to give you a day off to get religious instructions, they said. But they got a letter from the crown where they had to, or they thought it was better. They sent out thousands of copies of this letter saying, hey, you have to convert them to Christianity. This is a must. It will be easier. And once they learn the basics, the 10 Commandments, other little parts that they teach, then they can be instructed even further. So they are brainwashing you, and then the people who are brainwashed into this system, they will think, oh, when you don't abide, you're brainwashed, because that's what their religion teaches. If you don't follow, you're a heathen. You are a poor, what do they call it? Poor creature. If you want to follow your own mind, your own spirit, you just want to be spiritual, learn about history, learn about your ancestors, the Indians. They don't want you to learn that. They want to teach you and instruct you so you will always be obedient. But I always go back to this, and I'm going to end it with this. Knowledge makes you unfit to be a slave, which is why this is so important. So most people don't have the attention span to sit and read this. They just like, I can't. But me, that's what makes me doctor, cheapest, sunflower, because I'm going to go and get it. And even though all of that, I might have seen about 10 things that really stood out, it takes me to understand the whole document. And that was a lot for me to really understand what the hell did they do to my people. I get it. But we got a whole book to get through. So, yeah, let's continue. This week is about the religious instruction of the Negro. And hopefully TikTok don't continue to ban the knowledge. TikTok. This is not fake knowledge. But I guess I have to say this is for entertainment purposes only. Alright. So, yeah, I'm out of here, guys. It's late as hell. I'll see y'all tomorrow. You already know what time it is. Bye. Thank you for pumping the hearts. Peace out. Oh, it's a lot of people in here. Yes, y'all. Make sure y'all following. I got to get out of here. I got patients in the morning. Bye. I didn't know it was 11 people in here. Bye, guys. All right, guys. I'll see you.